Hello and welcome to Geek It Plays Epic Landscape Tutorials. This is episode number 9 entitled Rock Valley. In this tutorial we're going to create a valley full of rocks and make it look very interesting. So let's begin by setting up our camera. We're just going to move it up a little bit right here. Next we're going to create a normal terrain. And let's right click and edit object. And let's click on peaks. Now we're going to use our paint tool and use the dig tool, and we're just going to dig the peak right off and just make it a little more interesting. And while I'm working with this terrain, I want to quickly remind you that we have a forum you can post your work on at geekitplay.com. Okay, so something interesting like this. And to get it how we want it, sometimes the process takes a little bit of time. Okay. Almost there. Okay, let's go to our Road tab and click on Diffusive. And we might want to click on that a few more times so it'll give us a nice, smooth, eroded look. Next, increase the resolution to 1024 by 1024. And now when we view this close up, it will have a higher quality. Okay, let's take our sunlight and we're just going to move it to the front. Let's click on our main camera and adjust it a little bit. We're going to create a panoramic view by going to our render options and clicking on render to screen, and let's use a user-defined aspect ratio and set it to 480 by 240. And you can see it gives us a nice panoramic view. Let's take our camera and reposition it now that we have a panoramic view. And just slightly right here. Let's preview this. And we have kind of a valley right here. Okay? Let's edit object again, and let's just get rid of some of this right here. We're going to shrink it down a little bit. And that will just make it a little bit more open. Okay, and now it's more open right here and through this area. At this point we're going to add some materials to our terrain. So let's select our material. And we're going to use a material that we've previously created. And all the materials that are used in these tutorials are available for purchase on our website at www.geekitplay.com. And this collection would be Epic Landscape Booster Pack. It's not necessarily imperative that you purchase this. We also have another tutorial in this series entitled Epic Rocks, where we show you how to make rocks and other materials. But the booster pack helps out a little bit and makes it a little bit easier. So if you want to save a little bit of time, the booster pack's a good idea. I'd also like to encourage you to take advantage of our forum and post some of your work there, or just view some other people's work and get some of your creativity flowing. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and click on Object Standard, and let's decrease our scale. Okay, and select our twisted rock and let's set it about the same. Okay, and let's preview this. And here we have our valley in our material that's rocky with some moss on it. Now let's zoom in a little bit here, and let's click on a single rock, and this is sort of an interesting looking rock. Let's rotate it and scale it down, and let's place it about like this. So we have kind of a pointy rock here. Let's create another rock. And let's shrink this one. And with rocks, when you're placing them, you're just going to have to play with them. Let's just rotate and scale and place. And this is where your thumbnail becomes helpful. And that gives us a really unique look here. Now let's add just one more rock. And scale it down And we're going to place it with the other rocks, so they're kind of a little group of rocks over here. Okay, let's select all three rocks. Click on the top one, press Shift, and then click on the bottom one. It will select all of them. Now let's select a material and let's switch it to Old Rock 2. And let's open this and let's change it to Object Standard and decrease the scale. And let's just click on our other materials and reduce the scale on these as well. I want to give it a little bit more detail. Let's preview. And you see we have very interesting rocks over here and some pretty interesting shapes. So next let's go to our terrain and open our advanced material editor, and let's add ecosystem. And when we add, we're going to add some rocks. We want to decrease the density and the scaling. Let's populate and see what we have. And since the density is so low, we'll have some sparse rocks around. And let's click on our rocks and let's change the material to Old Rock. Okay, and that gives us some variation. And because we set the density so low, this rocks will be sparse. And let's see how this is coming along. And for now, that's good for our foreground. Let's go ahead and move on to our background. Let's create another terrain. And we're going to edit it and we're going to increase the size. And click OK. And let's go ahead and stretch it about like this. And let's add another over here. And for this next one, let's go ahead and stretch it out wide. And that flattens out our mountains quite a bit. And let's just flatten it. And then let's add another one behind it. We've got to fill up the space and make sure that we don't have any empty spaces. Okay, and let's flatten that down as well. Just make sure we've covered all of the space here. So now we have these nice hills and rocks, and let's select all of our terrain and add our rock material to our new terrain. We'll choose the Old Rock. And let's open to edit this, and let's change this to World Standard, and then decrease the scale. And let's click Ecosystem and add rocks. And let's decrease the density, and we want to increase the scaling and then populate that. And we need to increase the density and add just a few more rocks. So let's preview. You can see it's added some very big rocks through here, and it's starting to get an interesting feel to it. We need to make a few adjustments, so let's select our back terrain and let's decrease the scaling and populate that, and maybe the density down just a little bit. And what this actually does is gives us perspective. The larger rocks are up close and the smaller rocks are further away. So when we preview it, it'll create distance for us. Okay, let's zoom out and let's create one more terrain and stretch it really big. I'm just going to fill the full width of the camera view. Let's right click and edit our object, and let's increase the resolution to 1024 by 1024. Maybe just dig down this peak right here a little bit. Okay, And let's go ahead and preview. And this terrain we've created is going to be our background. Now in previewing this, I've decided that maybe I would like 2 background mountains instead of just one. So we're going to shrink it and add another one. And it's coming together nice. And this is a perfect example of not being afraid to change your mind and go back and redo something that you've created. And I've chosen to go with these rolling hills that are overlapping rather than one large big mountain in the background. I think it looks more interesting. Let's select these back 2 mountains and let's add a landscape, and we're going to load Black Snow Mountains. Let's render that and see how it looks. And you can see our little rock valley here. There's a couple things we can do to make this a little bit more interesting. Let's go to our first terrain and open to edit it. And let's click on our topmost and add an ecosystem. And let's click and drag to move it up. And let's add a plant. And we're going to use a long yellow grass. This is normal long grass here. You can use this, or you can just use regular grass as well. Okay. Let's wait a second for that to generate. Okay, right here in the repulsion from layer, let's increase that about 45. And this just helps with the distribution of our layers of rock. Next, let's go to our density and bump it up almost all the way. Let's leave the decay for now, and let's scale down to about here. Let's go to color and edit our color map, and let's do something a little bit more gray, yellowish gray color right here. Okay, let's populate and see what that does. At this point we want to reposition our camera, get a better view of what we've created. So let's just move this up a little bit and back. You just need to reposition it till it looks good. Okay. Let's go back to our terrain and decrease the density and size just a bit. Watch the thumbnail. Maybe a little bit more. Let's populate. And we're ending up with some grass and just not quite as many as we had before. And I'd like to see what this is going to look like, so let's go ahead and render that and preview it. Okay, and it's bright because we're using a lot of lights. We need to work on the atmosphere a little bit, and let's make these mountains a little bit duller so that they don't look like they're on the same line and occupying the same space as our foreground. So let's zoom out and go to this mountain and maybe move it this way a little bit. Okay, gives us a little bit more balance to our scene. Next, let's choose the other background mountain, and we're just trying to balance it a little bit better. I think it seems like it's missing something, so let's add this little terrain right here. Okay, now let's select our Black Snow Mountains for that small terrain. It just felt like something was missing in this area. Just want to tweak this and get it right. Okay, looks a lot better now. Let's go to our atmosphere and load an atmosphere. And let's choose Mountain Haze. Actually, on second thought, let's choose Rocky Desert. Okay. Okay, I think that's looking really good. Let's go to our terrain number 2 though and edit the materials. And we're going to just address the scale. Okay. And let's select Object Standard. And click OK. And that's just going to give us a little rougher texture on the ground here. Okay, and let's go to our atmosphere editor. We're just going to quickly go through our settings that we loaded for our atmosphere. And you'll notice we use the spectral model, and our lighting is set pretty bright. We have a lot of sunlight, up to 87%. And we have sky and fog with no glow. We can actually make it slightly glowing, but it just adds a little bit wider on the ground. Let's scale that back. Okay, and we want to increase the quality because we're using clouds here and we don't want them to become grainy. Okay. And also, let's add quality to the lighting as well. And add global illumination. Okay. And let's go right here and do 800 by 400. Okay. And let's render our final product. And here we have our rendering. And you'll notice because we're using a lower resolution, the grass is a little bit pixelated and the clouds are a little bit grainy. So if you have the time, you can always go back and put it on higher settings and render it and increase the quality so it'll be a nice and smooth image. But this is our rock valley, and it looks to me like something out of Lord of the Rings or something like that. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching this tutorial by Geek at Play Studio, and please come and visit us on the web at www.geekatplay.com.